Welcome to another edition of the SprintCarUnlimited.com Deep Dive presented by Dottie's Family Market in Dover, PA. Joining us on the show today is former Sprint Car crew chief and Sprint Car Hall of Famer Gary Deuce Turrill. Before we get to Deuce, Dottie's Family Market in Dover, PA is your one-stop shop on the way to the races. They have fresh-made sandwiches and subs with all the fixins, perfect for a night at the racetrack. Dottie's has everything you need in one location, including a full-service deli, wide selection of groceries, and gas. If you're looking to dine in, head over to the Hive Coffee House and Cafe for a great sandwich. There's a seasonal greenhouse on site, and also go to Dottie's Crab House, where you can dine in for fresh seafood and all-you-can-eat Maryland crabs. Head over to the corner of Canal and Bull Road in Dover, PA. Dottie's Family Market has you covered. Now here's Deuce. Gary, welcome to the Deep Dive. How are you? And thank you for joining the show.
Well, I'm doing great. Had a great visit with everyone at Knoxville for the Nationals, and I want to thank you for having me on your show.
No problem. I like the palm tree.
Well, I'm sitting in my kitchen. That was my wife's idea instead of looking at just stuff hanging on the wall.
This is a first. This is a first, and so you're definitely the first one who did a background, and I like it. It makes me feel like it's a nice summer day at the beach.
Well, it'd be a good place to be right now.
So obviously you have an illustrious history, and you're in the Sprint Car Hall of Fame. You went in this past year, and I want to, obviously I'll get to all that, and 89, 90, a magical time kind of in your career, but back when it all started, how did you get into racing in the first place?
Well, from the time I remember anything, it was about cars. Well, there's, street cars, hot rods. My dad raced back in the early 50s. In 1954, when I was born, he had to quit. I had a brother that was 4 years older than I, and he contracted polio. And so that kind of turned our life upside down, and we moved from our little town of Marietta, Ohio, to Columbus, Ohio, for Terry to be closer to hospitals and everything. So my dad had to quit, but I don't know, the car thing was just always in me. And when we were in Columbus, my dad had car lots, so I was around cars, from the time I remember. I can remember 1964, my dad had a 63 Corvette split window, and I remember driving it around. So it was just always about cars. And I guess probably when I was 10 or so, we moved back to Southern Ohio, where my folks were from, and I discovered dirt tracks. My dad and my granddad took us to a few, and at that time they were jalopies, modifieds and stuff. But early 60s, mid 60s, when I saw my first sprint car at Hilltop Speedway in between Marietta and Belpre, I was hooked. That's all I needed to see was that first sprint car, and it's just been game on ever since.
So I believe in 1972, you hooked up with Rick Unger. How did that all come about? And how old were you at that point?
Um, well, let me back up just a few years. Like I said, where I'm from, we had three racetracks: Skyline Speedway on Friday night.
Yep.
Ohio Valley Speedway in Parkersburg, West Virginia on Saturday, Hilltop Speedway on Sundays. And at that time, we were watching Tommy Dixon, J.D. Lease, a lot of different racers from, that area. And there was a car right from my hometown of Belpre, owned by Bernard and Burl Moore, a red and white number 27. And they hired Steve Unger, which is Rick's dad.
Okay.
And he came to town and just started to dominate. I mean, it was just unreal how many races he would win. And if I wasn't able to make it to Skyline on Friday nights for whatever reason, I'd ride my bicycle downtown to this little gas station they had where they kept the race car, and I'd stand back looking at this race car, and Steve was just the type he befriended kids, and I got to know him a little bit. And then like when I'd take my brother, which he was in a wheelchair, um, I'd take him to the races. And the way the pits were situated back then, we could actually uh, watch the pit area from just there was just a fence that separated us. And of course, back then all they had were pickup trucks and open trailers, so the distance from us to the race car was not that far away. And Steve noticed my brother, and he'd come up and talk to us and this and that. So that went on for, I don't know, 2, 3 years, something like that. And then when I got my driver's license in 1970, I had an old raggedy old pickup truck and put a push bumper on it, and away I went. I was a push truck driver. And I always made it a point to push Steve Unger off. He was our hero. So, I was his personal push truck driver, I guess. But then the sprint cars kind of faded away for whatever reason. I don't really know. But so then it was special events. The Shriners always had a race early in the season, mid-season, late season, where they had all three racetracks were sponsored by the Shriners. They put it on $1,000 to win, which was unheard of back in the late 60s, early 70s. And they draw 70, 80, 90 race cars. So I was lucky enough to see, from the West, um, Dick Gaines, Larry Miller, Don Nordhorn, Bob Kinzer, all those guys. And then you had our regulars, and then we'd draw the Western PA cars, Lou Blaney, Ralph Corderson, Ted Wise, and we even drew in Kenny Weld and Jan Opperman a couple times. So I was exposed to all these race cars, and it was just unbelievable. I mean, that time of racing was unbelievable. And I can remember sitting at the kitchen table with my brother. We'd have a road map out, trying to figure out, okay, here we are in Belpre. How do we go from here to Williams Grove? Or how do we go from here to, Eldora, whatever. So, that's just kind of how it started. Well, in 71, the Moore boys had sold their race car, and they were going to try and build a NASCAR track in Parkersburg, West Virginia. And they wanted Steve Unger to kind of be the general manager, the front man, I guess, for the thing, And so he moved his family down here, or down to Belpre. And unbeknownst to me, I didn't know it at the time. And I was sitting at my uncle's house, and right beside my uncle's house was a body shop. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden this pickup truck pulls in. On the side of it said Steve Unger's Rockland Body Shop. And I'm going, really? That's a familiar name. Well, out pops Steve Unger. So I put my coat on. I go right over there to see what's going on.
Sure.
And I could tell he knew me, but it maybe been a year or so, and I wasn't at the racetrack. So I introduced myself and told him who I was and my brother and everything. And he actually come over to my uncle's house and to visit with my brother for a few minutes. And he said, well, I've got a son, Rick. He's your age. He's just getting started in racing. You guys have a lot in common. So I met Rick, and this and that one thing led to another. And Rick called me one day. He said, hey, Dad and I are going to Morgantown, West Virginia, to Jasper Petit's. He's going to drive for Jasper this year, and Jasper's got a car that I can drive. You want to go with us? I said, let's go. And it was on from then. I was just part of the deal. And we run that car a little bit, and just wherever Rick went, I went with him, to help and learn and things like that. And then in 78, when the Outlaws started, we were at Texas for the very first Outlaw race. And Rick came back from the pay win and said, I might regret this, but I think I found you a job that actually would pay you money to work on these things. And it was with a guy by the name of Butch Barr from Grand Island, Nebraska, which is right dead in the middle of the United States. So of course let's do it, So I moved out there and went racing, and things just progressed from there.
You know, you seem to gravitate to working on them. You never wanted to drive them. The drivers get all the notoriety, they get all the attention, some bad when they don't do well. But what kind of drew you to working on them as opposed to maybe getting in one and driving?
Well, first thing, I was always too big, too tall, too heavy, and it was a lot easier to be around something to work on than to try to talk somebody into driving it. I mean, I had aspirations of that, but I come to realize early that, even back then, if you didn't have a pocket full of money, nobody was just going to put some kid in a car. So my best bet was, and I was always amazed at the mechanics of it.
So 81, I believe you hook up with Brad Doty.
Yeah. In, I, I spent some time, like I said, in Nebraska, and in the meantime, Rick had moved to um, Memphis, Tennessee, to drive for Bobby Sparks, and he coaxed me to come down there in 1979. So I spent most of 79 and 80 working with Rick, and that's where I met my wife. That's where she's from. She's from a racing background. Her brother Joe Gillentine raced. Her dad Bob Gillentine raced. He fielded cars for Sammy Swindell for a little bit, and then I got a call from Brad Doty to race with him in '81, and it was short lived. Um, it was just short lived. They ended up hiring Tom Sanders, and so I hooked up with um, oh man, another guy from Ohio to finish. Al Hager finished out the season with Al, and then in '82 I was hooked back up with Rick Unger. We did the whole outlaw deal for a guy by the name of Merle Thomason.
Yep.
And in '83, I got a phone call from Sammy Swindell, and I worked with Sammy '83 and '84, and most of '84. And I left him to put a deal together with Rick, and always migrate back to my buddy Rick. We put a deal together with Mike Bishop out of Texas, and Dave Blaney took over in '85. We run that car a little bit till Mike run out of money. And we finished out the year in Stanton's car, Gary Stanton's house car. And then I went to Challenge for a little bit, worked at Challenge, kind of learned the business end of it and building chassis and stuff like that.
What was it like working with Sammy?
I learned a lot. He's a very intense person. Um, Second is not acceptable. Mistakes aren't acceptable. So there was moments that it was, really intense. But like I said, I learned a lot. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I learned a lot. He was so intense. He wanted to go bigger and better.
Sure.
And I think some of his frustrations, it wasn't happening fast enough. So, just it is what it is.
You guys won the Knoxville Nationals, though.
Yep, 1983. And that's funny that you say that, because he was always pretty cool and calm at the racetrack, as long as things went well. Even if we weren't really fast, as long as there was no mistakes or nothing go wrong, everything was fine. But Knoxville's just a different animal. I remember a lot of people saying we race 100 times a year to get ready to go to Knoxville. And that, I mean, uh, we felt like, we had a shot at it. Um, One a story I like to tell about that, we were racing with the drag racer, Raymond Beetle,
Mm-hmm.
and we were doing our own engine program with Bob Westfall. And earlier in the year, we'd had a lot of engine trouble, a lot of bearing failures and this and that. And but them things with Thunder, they run, you know, and he built an aluminum motor and we were getting good results out of that thing. I mean, that was the first aluminum motor we had. Well, it had pretty much run its course by about the time we got to the Nationals, and it was time to be rebuilt. So Raymond sent Bob Westfall to Knoxville, and we rebuilt that engine in Sammy's friend's garage, you know, on a wooden bench, because Sammy wanted that aluminum motor. He felt like that's the one he needed to have the best chance to win Knoxville, and we did.
One of the things that I know a lot of people have had problems interviewing. They say they don't, the problems. I have never had a problem interviewing Sammy. I thought he's always been very open and, even funny at times, but he's very meticulous.
Very, very. And, like I said, when he's working, he's working. You know, when it's race time, it's race time. But up until that and after that, he's fine. And I think any person that has a passion for anything, whether it's racing, football, baseball, playing a piano, whatever, if you don't have that passion of get out of my way, I'm going to do it hell or high water, they're not successful. So you have to have an attitude to a certain extent to be successful. Um, I think especially in auto racing because you have a good mechanic, you got a good car owner, you got good cars. But when the green flag drops, buddy, it's up to the driver. There's it's just his deal then. So I think like I said, you have to have that attitude of here I come, like it or not. And Sammy had, and he still got it actually. I mean, he made some really good laps at Knoxville.
Yeah. Well, not to kind of get off topic. What did you think about him at Knoxville? To just watch him still going around, and he was competitive.
Um, yeah, I mean, he was. Um, I know now he's just having,
Yeah.
he's having fun. Um, he's always liked to innovate things. So that car itself is a innovation between him and Fleet. Um, I guess probably the only thing that bothers me is if he would take a hit
Yes.
like Brian Brown did of his not of his own making. That'd be hard on a fellow our age. Hell, if I fall down in the living room, it takes me a week to get over it. So that's the only thing. But I love the idea of him being able to get out and have fun. And I talk about taking that hit, and I don't know if you saw it a few months ago. He took a pretty nasty hit at a midget race at IRP, and he's a tough old guy. He crawled out, and I'm sure he was sore for a few days after that. But that was a good hit. So um, I know he stays physically fit. Um, he's smart enough to know he has to, especially at his age. So I think he does a tremendous job.
Yeah, I was even surprised with how well he ran at Knoxville. Not granted, he wasn't in the A main, and okay, when I say competitive, but for what he was doing, he was able to battle guys.
Yeah, yeah. I
You
mean, he
know,
could race wheel to wheel with him and pass him. And,
sure.
he'd get passed back, he'd pass him back. So I thought he did a great job. And then the idea, yeah, he didn't make the A main, but a lot of good racers did make the A main.
That's
A
true.
lot of good racers that race 70, 80 times a year didn't make the A main. So, here's a guy that doesn't race that much, almost made it. So,
No, I agree. Challenger chassis. Now, before we get to that, you got your first, I believe, your first crew chief win was with Dave Blaney.
yeah.
How
Yeah.
nerve wracking was it to finally reach that crew chief? Because you get to be a crew chief now, the driver's like a quarterback in the NFL. They get probably too much blame and too much credit. sometimes because this is really a team sport. You can have the best driver, and I've said this a lot. You can have the best driver with the owner with the most money and the best crew chief, and it just doesn't work. There's a chemistry there, which I'll get
Yeah.
to later in the show. But uh, what was it like being the crew chief and the guys calling the shot? The guy calling the shots and turning the wrenches to make this thing go.
Well, when I left Sammy and Rick and I put the two car together from Houston, um, we won an outlaw show at Sedalia, Missouri. So that was our first outlaw show together. That was my first outlaw show as being the crew chief. Um, it was a relief, but it was also a burden, I guess, because it falls on, now you're the crew chief, it kind of falls on your shoulders. But I took it in stride. I enjoyed it. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be the shot caller. I love input from the driver because it's, I feel like um, there's a lot of mechanics, crew chiefs out there. They set it up, tell the driver shut up and drive it. But I don't agree with that theory. It works for some, but I like the idea of the driver having total confidence in what he's getting in because he's the one that ultimately has to go down there and run that thing in the corner wide ass open.
Yep.
So if he's got confidence in what we've done, what I've done, he's going to run it harder. And the harder you run it, the faster you are. So I took it on my shoulders and run with it. I loved it.
Challenger chassis. How important was that for you just to see a volume of maybe what different teams wanted in their chassis? Maybe just to learn that end of the game. That had to be huge for your crew chief career.
Yeah,
So
I mean, just to experience, from round tubing to a complete car, just a stick of tubing to, sell it, build it, set it up, help the guy that bought it, things like that. And the business end of it of, what things cost and how hard it is to get parts and things like that. So yeah, it was an eye opener for sure.
so before 1989. So here we go. I got a lot of questions. So how does the deal with Danny Peace, Doug Wolfgang, Robert Hubbard, and you get put together in the first place? How does this even materialize?
Okay, we have to back up a little bit to 1987. I left Challenge to work with Sheldon Kinzer,
Okay.
and that's the year that he got sick. And halfway through the year, I hooked up with Schumann, Ronnie Schumann, finished out the outlaw season. And I said, "This is it. I'm going to go home." I was mad, frustrated. So we went back to Memphis, and a local guy by the name of Mike Ward, he'd won a lot of races around the area. He had gotten hooked up with a fellow by the name of Howard Blankenship that had money, and Jack Elam from J&J was instrumental in getting me the job. So Mike and I raced all out in '88. We got off the porch. Mike was an outstanding local guy, and I took him to Eldora. We won a USAC show somewhere in Kentucky. We won a lot of races, and but it didn't matter. At the end of the year, Howard Blankenship was going to go help Andy Hillenberg, which that's okay. But there again, outstanding year. I don't have a job. So I'd made up my mind. I'm going to try to find somebody that will sponsor a race car. I want my own race car. So at the end of the year, if I'm dead broke, it's my fault. if I've got enough money to do it again, it's because I did it. Because I have to go into this before I go any farther. There's 2 or 3 different kind of car owners. And the first and the most successful car owner is somebody like Carl Kinzer. He builds the cars, he drives the truck, he oversees the motors, he finds the money, he makes the decisions. It all falls on his shoulders. Boom, you got a winner. There's another kind of a car owner is, somebody like a Casey Luna, somebody like that stands back, spends the money, hires the right people, and lets them do their job. And all the other car owners, all they do is control their losses. They want to tell you, okay, I'm going to hire you because you're really good, but here's how I want you to do it. Well, that's crap. And that's where 99% of the car owners fall into that category. And that's, if you think back, and I know you know them as well as I do, they're in it for 3 or 4 years and they get mad and they leave. So I just really, really, really wanted to have my own deal. And I was at Little Rock, Arkansas in 1988 for a race. And there was a Goodyear guy there. He was from Dallas. He was a distributor. And I sat there just shooting a breeze with him, and enrolled this shiny new pickup truck and trailer. And they dropped the gate on the trailer and rolled this car out. And I could tell everything was brand new. And it was a car that Challenge had built after I left that didn't really go over too well. It was just it wasn't that good of a race car. I'm not going to say anything bad about anybody, but it just didn't pan out. And that's what it was. And I made the statement, who would buy that car? And he said, well, it's some rich rookies. And I said, well, I need to meet them and straighten them out, just jokingly. And so I watched them all night, and they didn't do anything. And he said, are you serious about wanting to meet this guy? He said, he's a young guy. It seems like he's got the money to do what he needs to do. I said, yeah, I'd love to meet him. So the next weekend, I believe we went to Dallas. I don't know if that was the first. It was during that stretch of the USA had 4 races. And I don't know. It wasn't a USA race because that was the final race. But anyway, I met him in Dallas and we chatted. Danny and I chatted about, I said, I want to build a race car team that I own. Doug Wolfgang's going to drive it. I had talked to Doug about possibly, if I could put something together, would he drive it? He said, sure. So I could tell by the look on Danny's face, it intrigued him. He knew who I was. He knew, of course, who Doug was.
Sure.
He was a huge race fan. He said, I guess I got to study on that. He said, I don't know. So I don't know. A few days later, I don't know whether if I called him or he called me. He said, I don't know if I want to really sponsor a car, but would you be interested in you guys be interested in going to work for me? And I said, well, possibly, but I said, there's a lot of things that we're going to want for this to work properly. And I told him that I didn't want to move. I wanted to, have it in Memphis. Doug wanted to build his own cars at Brian Schnei's, that's his brother-in-law, and we wanted John Singer Motors. And we didn't want to chase points. We wanted to race. And Danny, he paused a little bit. He said, well, that sounds doable. So during the course of these 4 USA races, Robert Hubbard and I took a car from Memphis for Ricky Hood to drive, and we were out racing and, trying to do this and do that. And stayed in contact with Danny, and he said, I'm coming to Phoenix. I'd like to talk with Doug, meet with you guys and see what you think. So Doug was running Max Rogers' car, and he sailed it out of the ballpark into the junkyard and banged his knees up, and he was going to win the race. So he was upset about losing the race and banging his knees up. And anyway, we met, and he kind of just laid it out to Danny. Here's how it's going to be, son. Um, you know, T-shirt deals, mine's not negotiable. I want, Deuce has told you we want Sinead cars, Singer Motors, blah blah blah, and so we all kind of, went our way. And Danny told me, he said, I'll give you my answer next week at Devil's Bowl. So we get to Devil's Bowl, and he comes over. I mean, we're barely out of the pickup truck, and he said it's doable. He said, can you stay after the races, and we'll go order a truck and trailer, go to Memphis, set up a shop, a checking account, go to Singer's, meet with John. I'll give him deposit on motors, try to get Doug and Brian to come down. I'll give Brian some money for deposit. We were on our way.
So so Singer Motors at that point, before that car, because I never heard of Singer Motors. Where did you get hooked up with Singer? And then this is kind of an improbable thing. You hear of Gambler at the time. You went through some of the motor combinations out there. Singer, Schnee, not to say they were unproven, but it was still kind of a new type of combination. What made you guys go that route?
Well, Doug and John Singer had a lot of history together. They won the Knoxville Nationals together when Doug was driving the Speedway Motors car. John Singer won the Knoxville Nationals with Jan Opperman. He built John Singer was, in my opinion, right there with Carl Kinzer and Davy Brown. But John Singer was a very particular person. Hard to get along with, I guess is the best way to put it. And I don't know why he took a liking to me, but he did. I helped him. That's one of the things I left out. In 79, before I moved to Memphis, I helped him and Shane Carson with the Speedway Motors 4X. And I actually lived at John's house for 3 or 4 months. And some of the old school guys couldn't believe that here was this kid hanging out with John Singer, living at his house and helping him. It's just unheard of. So, like I said, Doug and John had a lot of history together, and I had history with him. And the biggest thing I knew from watching Doug back when he had the deal with Weichert, when he rolled in there with Weichert, they had Gambler cars. Well, then over the winter, Doug went to Bob Trossel and built, I don't know, 2 or 3 cars. And that's when he just knocked him dead, and Davy Brown goes without saying, his engine deal was bar none, some of the best out there. So I knew if Doug was happy with what he had, we would win some races. Now, did I know what we were going to do? Hell no. But I knew if I could put this thing together to where we're all on the same page, we'd be okay. We could win some races and the deal with chasing points. Doug said it best. He said, if we went out and won the World Outlaw title, it's because Steve Kinzer had a bad year. I mean, because Steve Kinzer was the king. He won them all. So, let's just go race. And that's when that whole USA thing. So we kind of just took a dot from Memphis, Tennessee, and made a circle. And whatever was the closest that paid the best is where we went, whether it was USA race, an outlaw show or an open show or whatever. That's kind of the way we approached it. And we stayed out of the political end of it. So the car deal, again, was just a deal where Doug knew Doug knew what he wanted in a race car. And it would be silly for me to try to talk him into driving anything other than that. We could have went and bought Challengers or Gamblers or whatever, and he made those cars fast. He won in Gamblers, he won in Challengers. That's what Max Rogers had. But I just knew if we could do the deal the way we wanted to do it, it would be better for everybody involved. So that's what we did.
So basically, Danny Peace didn't necessarily cut you a check. He was actually there and paid who he needed to pay. And like we hear it now. We hear 500,000 $1,000,000, whatever. Without, I mean, what does a guy do in 1989 to do it right? Because it all came from him, or we think. But how, we'll get to that in a minute. But to just where you guys are like, hey, this is going to work. Because let's face it, guys come and go. Guys say they got big checkbooks and they don't. Uh, at what point do you go, okay, we're set? And what's that number?
Well, we didn't have a number. Danny said, just get what you need. So when we left Dallas, we ordered a truck and trailer. We went to Memphis, and I had a good friend of mine, Bruce Sumter Tool and Die, had a shop. So I said, Bruce, I'll pay the rent if you let us come in here and hang out and build cars. Oh yeah, it was good for him, good for us, because he was an outstanding machinist. He could build anything we couldn't buy. So Danny opened up a checking account. I don't remember how much he put in. I think 20 grand. And we went. He down payment on motors, give Brian Schnee money, and I started ordering parts and getting this and getting that. And when Doug called and said, send me everything I need to have a car rolling around, because I'm building this thing from scratch. So I need to put it on its wheels to make sure I got the shock tires where they need to be, this and that. So, I sent him a front end, rear end, and all the stuff. And Hubbard and I Hubbard, Danny and I picked up the truck and trailer and went to Memphis. I think probably a week later, we headed to Sioux Falls in the middle of winter.
Ooh.
Yeah. We got to Sioux Falls, and Doug had a rolling car sitting there. And he had another frame kit and all the pieces. And we rolled it in this empty box. And 46 days later, we were in Savannah, Georgia, outfitted, everything built, painted, polished, lettered, trailer outfitted. Hubbard and I worked our tails off. And we rolled that thing out of the trailer, and Doug looked at it and, yeah, man, it looks good. And I'll never forget this. And I've told this story 100 times. Push off for hot laps. He's idling around there. And Savannah, Georgia's a big, big racetrack. And he was going through 3 and 4, and they dropped the green. Well, he just put her on the mat and sailed it down into turn 1, wide open. And I'm thinking, I guess he's comfortable with what he's got, and we had a good day. I mean, we ended up winning the race, which was pretty neat considering what we'd done. But probably the neatest part about winning that race was I felt like halfway through the race, he could have passed Steve at any time and probably drove away. But he waited to the last corner, last lap, and passed him and won. And so, after the races, everybody's happy, and you know how it is, happy and pretty much in disbelief. Because, Brian was there with some of his friends, so he got to see his car win a national event. Singer was there overseeing his baby. And, me and Hubbard and Danny and Louise, his girlfriend, my wife. And so we're all there, Doug and Jerry, and and everything. And so Doug and I get a little quiet time. I said, Doug, I said, I am no way being critical of what you've done today. It's outstanding. But I said, boy, I felt like you were fast enough. You could have passed Steve way early. He said, I could have. He said, but you don't ever want to give Steve Kinzer a chance to figure out how to pass you back. So, his you over the years, you watch racers, you watch your car the most, but then when you get somebody like Doug Wolfgang that's driving your race car, and then you really get to watching him, some of the things that he could do in a race car was just unbelievable. How he would set people up and sometimes even wait to pass them where he needed to pass them. It was just unbelievable. So, but getting back to, the money thing, we went on a roll. We won that first race. We won the second race. We won the third race. Well, now all of a sudden, the little bag that's I carry around with the money in it, it's full of money. So we never had, Danny took care of the rebuilds on the engines, but I paid everything else out of our winnings, tire bills, fuel, motel rooms. Hey, we need a wing, go get a wing. I mean, so it supported itself.
43 times in 86 races. That's
Yep.
50% win percentage. That's unheard of. Okay. It's one of the top 3 years. Obviously, I put the Weichert year in 85, 55 wins, 17 in a row. And then I'm looking at, I believe it's Steve 87, 88, and you guys right neck and neck for second, because you won 43 times. But I think my dad and I charted it that year. I think you were in the top five, like 89 to 90% of the time. Like, it was in a ridiculous, ridiculous number.
Yeah, we run second 21 times.
That's what I mean. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Kings Royal, you would have won. I remember vividly Ed Lynch kind of got into you. You were lapping him. And then, because you would have ran down, I believe Sammy was leading at the time. And then, of course, the Williams Grove National Open, you had, if I'm not mistaken, the Magneto problem.
Actually, the National Open, we actually broke a motor. That is the one and only time we had an engine failure all year. We actually broke a rod.
Okay, so then I might be
Yeah.
thinking of the 50th anniversary race.
I think we run third
I think
in
Steve
that.
won that. I'm not. It's been
Yeah.
a lot of years.
Yeah, it's been a day or two since then.
But
Yeah.
regardless, you have this year. Okay, that's just incredible. You're paying the bills out of the money sack from your winnings. Then things start to go haywire. You start hearing stuff. It unravels. We have the HUD stuff, and it's been documented. For you as a team, you three guys, Robert, you, and Doug, when do you start hearing rumblings of what's going through your mind at that point?
Well, Danny called me before it ever came out and told me that Louise was in some trouble with the government. And I don't really want to go
Yeah,
into
that's
what went on there, but what Doug and I decided, we talked, and Doug said, Deuce, do you feel like you've done anything wrong? No. I said, he goes, I don't think I've done anything wrong either, other than we want to race. He said, let's just race this shit till they come and get it. So that's how we took it. We're going to race it until they come and get it. And not one time during that whole year did any official government person, state person, anybody that had anything to do with anything ever approach me about anything. And, I had a checking account, a DP Motorsports checking account. I was writing checks out of it, putting money in that bank account. Never, ever, not one official person ever talked to Singer. They never talked to Brian, Hubbard, anybody. So that whole deal, we just kind of, it was embarrassing, but I don't know. I mean, we just decided to just race it until we can't, and that's what we did.
And I remember distinctly the match race stuff. What was that whole experience like at Knoxville? Of course, you win the Nationals, no big surprise there. But the whole match race thing that gained a lot of attention, and I hear people talk about that to this day.
Well, that was pretty neat. I mean, um, the World of Outlaws to me were founded on those three drivers.
Yeah.
I mean, Rick Ferkel was right up in there, but he was kind of getting a little older, and he never had the funding to do, what needed to be done in the later years. Bobby Allen was very instrumental in the World Outlaws, but those three carried that name throughout the early 80s, when the Outlaws really gained momentum, it was those three guys. So for them to cook up that match race thing was, I think, pretty neat. Like you said, it did gain a lot of attention. And, we were just fortunate enough to be on the receiving end of, like Doug. I mean, I think he even stated this in Victory Lane. The first one we drew the bottom, you know, and then we'd have to go, move up. But we won both races starting on the bottom, and that was an advantage. So, it was just Sammy could have probably easily had done it, or Steve, but it was just our turn, I guess.
So
Paid good. I like that part of it.
didn't like Steve draw, and he's like, "Come on."
Yeah,
the old picture of it. So that deal ends at the end of the year, which I'm sure at that point you expected.
yeah. I mean, we had a 2-year contract with Danny actually, and I kicked the idea around about trying to figure out how to just keep it all.
Mm-hmm.
I got a contract. I'm just going to keep it, but I didn't think that was right, so I didn't. So here we are once again. You know, best year ever. Sitting there, November, December, no job. So I talked to Williams brothers, Ray and Jay Williams, and they agreed to kind of just, they had race cars. Jeff Swindell had run their car. They'd run second in the World Outlaws to Bobby Davis. But, we told them we want to do, Singer Motors, Schnee cars, and we don't want to chase points. Okay, okay, okay. Well, that's right. As soon as we made our deal and got everything rolling, got parts coming in, it's when the USA failed. They folded rather. And then they were all gang ho on running the World Outlaws, which didn't really want to, but didn't really have a choice. So it changed the whole dynamics of our thinking. But we I don't remember exactly how many races we won. Some of my records got lost in a flooded basement, but I think we won, I don't know, 8 or 10, 12 races. We won the King's Royal,
I think it was 13th.
13 races in the King's Royal, run second to points,
Yep.
but we got fired.
So, whoa, got fired. So didn't Robert get fired first?
No, no, he actually stayed on with them.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought he got fired halfway, or they were talking because I remember a conversation I had with Doug, and he was mad because Doug could get mad.
Oh yeah, yeah,
He didn't like when people meddled,
yeah.
and I know through that I there was some meddling. So, and I thought they were going to let him go or let him or did let him go. I didn't know what it was. I was 18 at the time. So, how did that all transpire through that year? And how do you get fired? I mean, you won the King's Royal 13.
Uh, they were those middle car owners. that I told you about.
Okay.
Um, Partly my fault. I spoke my piece probably when I should have kept my mouth shut. Um, I think we had a lot of motor trouble, so we got to go to Shaver, got to go to Shaver, got to go to Shaver. So we went to Shaver, and for whatever reason, our engine program just sucked. That's the best way I can put it. Um, Come time for the Knoxville Nationals, I'd been promised a new motor for a month. We had two motors in the trailer. They were both wore out and kept, being promised, oh, yep, we'll get this motor to you, get this motor to you, get this motor to you. Well, I need a backup, in case. So anyway, we get this new motor right before the Nationals. We'd build a new car, but I could kind of see we were just one and done, you know.
Right.
So I went to Earl Gertie. I said, Earl, I'd like to rent a motor. I just want to take it, put it under the shelf, cover it up, and just let it sit there, just in case. So we worked out a deal. And we roll into Knoxville, new car, new shaver motor. And I don't really remember where we qualified, but we qualified outstanding because we started in the back of the heat race. So we were, top two or three, probably. And coming off a four for the start of the race, somebody clipped somebody and got turned sideways. Doug hit them, and it shoved Doug into the inside guardrail. And the front tubes got underneath the guardrail, it just ripped the tubes out of the race car, and it shoved the frame rail. We didn't run a down bar car, and it shoved the frame rail into the motor, busted the head on the motor and this and that. So here we are with a junk brand new car and a junk brand new motor. And in the trailer, we've got another car. That's not really an issue. It had some laps on it, but it was okay. Um, but now I'm faced with, now do I put one of them old wore out motors in it, or do I piss everybody off? Doug knew about this motor, and so did Hubbard. Or do I roll this brand new Gertie out that the Williams brothers had no idea was in their trailer? So we opted to do that because we were defending champions, and I wanted to win another one. Doug wanted to win another one, and so did Hubbard. I mean, like I said, that's why you race 100 times a year, to be good enough to have a shot at possibly winning the Knoxville Nationals, because that's what it's all about. So anyway, we put the car together and we dropped this motor in. And of course, it's not 10 minutes later. There's 150 people around us because here's this Gertie motor with these nice gold valve covers glistening in the sun. And here comes the Williams brothers, and they're, what the hell's going on? And I told them, I said, I took it upon myself to give us the best shot to win the Knoxville Nationals. And they didn't like it. And I understand. They were probably embarrassed a little bit. And I said, I don't know what to say. You say you own 4 or 5 motors. All I know is we've got a couple wore out motors, a busted motor, and Ronnie Shaver's here on vacation. That's all I can say. So that put us in the Friday night deal. And I think we were leading the race and broke a drive shaft, brand new drive shaft. So that's really, oh my heavens, what are we doing now? So, now we're looking at the alphabet, and, the rest is, as they say, is history. We go up through there and run 5th. But the writing was on the wall as far as our jobs,
I don't care what you say. You win the King's Royal and make a drive like that, Nationals.
Well, like I said, there's them different kind of car owners.
Different type of
owners. There's so many out there that control their losses. And, I may get some criticism over that. I don't really care. That's the way I see it. That's the way it's been. That's the way it will be, because you can sit back and look at all the flashes in the pan, the Wintermeyers, all the other. I mean, Leon Wintermeyer, he just controlled his own losses. That's all he did. He spent money, but he controlled his own losses. And I'm not picking on Leon. I worked for him with
Yep.
Kenny Jacobs, but that's what he did. And I could probably sit down and write a dozen the same way. And
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying. So it's just money makes people do different things.
So you have this great team, and it wasn't like it wasn't like Carl, where Carl established he has Steve and all this other stuff. Um, it wasn't Sammy, who basically had his own deals and ran them and did for years. This was three guys, all good guys, obviously, but Doug had a not good 1988 season. It was not good. Now he was in that whole Dusmore Stanton 40, then the 18. You were in the chassis deal, then you were in Tennessee. I don't know where Robert was at that time.
Robert's from Memphis.
Yeah.
Um, he had some drag racing background, and he helped a lot of local guys around that area. And he had actually helped Rick Unger and I in 1982.
Okay.
But he had to get off the road because his dad got sick. So he went home and kind of take care of business there. So he kind of just bounced around home there, and just probably a chance thing that when I put together that 4 race deal with Ricky Hood to run them USA races, um, I knew Robert. Hey, Hub, you want to go with me? Sure, I'll go with you. Well, I mean, we worked so well together. And then when the deal with Danny come along, I thought, well, I don't need to look any farther. This guy lives in Memphis, so I don't have to worry about logistics or any of that kind of stuff. And boom, off we go.
But you three guys get together and put together one of the greatest seasons in sprint car history. Seemed improbable. People weren't talking about you before you rolled into Georgia. So when you look back on that, how does that happen? And you have to look fondly about over what you guys accomplished in a short amount of time.
Well, like I said, I knew in the back of my mind, if I had the proper funding and Doug got what he wanted, that we would win some races. And I think the timing of the USA and the World Outlaw split, that helped us. I think they were concentrating sometimes more on the politics than they were the racing. I think part of it was our engine program. Singer had some proven cylinder heads that were working, and a lot of the other teams were experimenting with different cylinder heads, so they were off a little bit. Um, Timing, it's just and we knew what we were doing, and I think going into the deal with no expectations other than, yeah, we're going to win a few races. But when you win the first three that you go to against Steve Kinzer, Sammy Swindell, Dave Blaney, Mark Kinzer, it gives you a confidence of, okay, let's try this. Oh yeah, we can do this. Let's try this. And we didn't have an owner, shaking his head, going, "What'd you do that for?" I Danny Peace never questioned one thing about what I bought, what I did, how I did it, how Doug did it. Of course, when you're winning every other night, you don't. So that was a big, big, big
Yeah.
plus. But I can remember Doug one time, we had went 5 or 6 races without winning a race. And Doug, we were standing there shooting the breeze. He said, "Were you guys getting nervous? We haven't won a race in a few races." I said, "No, we've already won more than I figured, so we're golden." and so it was just, I don't know, just one of them deals. We just kept our heads down, did our jobs, and Hubbard did his very well. Doug, he was an outstanding driver, and I did okay as far as putting it all together and keeping it together. And, you know, Danny did his part. Need money? Just let me know. But like I said, um, we did so well that the thing took care of itself.
What was it like being around Doug Wolfgang and wrenching a car that he drove? He's on my Mount Rushmore. I think from a technical standpoint, he's probably the best technical driver. I mean, Steve Kinser was a bear. I mean, he could muscle a car around a track and do things that jaw dropping. But Doug was more of a technical guy and
Yes.
a thinking through a race. To me, the
Yes.
best of all time at doing that.
Yes.
What was it like being around a guy who was just that gifted, that good, and also could do stuff on the car?
Um, well, I think probably the first thing before we ever made a lap, we were actually up in Sioux Falls getting everything. We were at a Denny's eat, and he goes, we'd known each other quite a few years. Just hey, how you doing, or whatever. He said a lot of people think I'm an asshole, hard to get along with. He said, but I'm not really. He said, I just want to win so bad that all I ask is if you guys sweat as much as I sweat and try as hard as I try, we won't have any trouble. And I thought, well, okay, that's fair enough, you know. So um, as the season went on, I mean, Hubbard and I would, if we didn't wash the night before after a race, we'd get up 8 o'clock, car wash, be back to the motel by 9:30, and have everything drug out, working on it. And Doug would come running up, sweating. He'd already run 3 miles.
Yeah.
And y'all need any help? No, not right now. Okay, I'm going to go eat and take a shower. But if I said, "Oh man, I need," okay, what do you need me to do? So I mean, that was such a blessing that he cared enough. Uh, so I knew whether we run first or 10th. I don't know if we ever run 10th,
Yeah.
but
I'm not
in,
that.
in the 8D anyway.
Yeah.
Um, he give it his all. I mean, he give it his all. And like I said, he was so calculating, um, you know, watching him every lap in that race car. Like you said, Steve Kinser was an animal. He could, if the car wasn't really good, he could figure out a place on the track to make it good. And Sammy was the same way, or he'd just slam you out of the way and go on.
Yeah.
But Doug, he got them cars to where they almost drove themselves. I mean, them things drove, you didn't see his arms flailing. He would just go down there and turn the corner and go on. So his feel, well, he told me, he said, I like the big racetracks, the bigger the better, because when I'm in the zone, everything slows down and I can see what's going to happen. I relate it to Dale Earnhardt always saying he could see the air.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I, however you can relate to that in a dirt track sprint car, Doug could see what's going to transpire in front of him. So it was a joy. And the thing of it is, win, blow a tire, whatever, crash. At the end of the night, it was always thank you. I appreciate what you do for me. So, you know,
Can't get better than that.
no, no. I mean, that's when you've been up since 8 o'clock and it's midnight and it's 100 degrees out and you've burnt Snap-on in your hand from picking up a wrench at the motel parking lot, and the guy, like I said, whether we run or won or whatever, thank you, appreciate what you've done. That's. And another thing I thought was pretty neat, um, he said, we're in this to win races. Um, a lot of teams think they got to be buddies. They got to hang around. They got to go to dinner together. They got to watch TV together. They got to do this. He said, it's not that I don't want to, but we don't have to be successful. This is business. So he approached it as a business. I think I did too, because that's how I made a living. That's how I fed my wife and paid my house payment and all that. And at the time we only had one son. So, but there were times we'd go out and eat, have a drink, have a good time, but we didn't have to do that to make it work. You know what I'm saying? We didn't
Very
have to.
organic.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it was just a good combination. Good combination. I wish we could have had about 4 or 5 years together with an owner or a sponsor that let us do our deal. Would have been a lot of fun. I don't know if we could have duplicated 89, and I wouldn't expect it, but we'd have won our share. We'd enjoyed it.
Well, when you average 28, I mean, now 28 is unheard of. But so you move on. You guys go your separate directions, so to speak. Um, and you did some stuff with Kenny Jacobs, Terry Shepard, and then you do the deal where you help out other guys if they're having a weekend deals or Turrill Tech, I believe you call
Turrill
it.
Tech, yeah.
Yep.
Mhm. Yeah.
Where I think you were one of the first guys who would, for lack of a better term, rent out your services.
Right. Yeah. Um, I run the World Outlaws with Kenny Jacobs in '93 with Dan Motter.
Mm-hmm.
And there again, Dan was a nice guy, but he was one of those middle owners. Um,
Yeah.
and I thought, you know what? Why am I doing this? I love Kenny Jacobs. He's a great guy, good race car driver. But why am I putting up with the other crap? I don't like racing for points because you go to places you don't want to go to,
Yeah.
but you got to go. And human, whatever it is, you don't do as well if you don't like it. So I thought, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go home. I didn't want to go to Minnesota for the winter,
Nobody
and build
does.
cars.
Nobody does.
And that's where the deal was. And I sure wasn't going to move up there. So I went home and I thought, I could maybe do a thing where I could help guys on the weekends and have my week at home. And I did that. And I did a driving school for a year at Memphis Motorsports Park, which was pretty good until they tripled the rent on me, and I told them to stick it. But the Turl Tech thing was good. I went, and a lot of it was just basic, getting the rear end square, getting the wing height off the car properly, and just getting them to think about what they were doing and this and that. I'll never forget in the early 90s when I was doing this, the reversed arm car was the big deal, where you have the longer torsion arms on the right and the short ones on the left. And I'd roll in to this guy's shop and he'd be telling me about this car, handling, blah, blah, blah. And I said, why did you buy this race car when you don't understand? Well, Steve Kinzer. I said, oh, ho, ho. Are you Steve Kinzer? Well, no. I said, well, is your dad Carl Kinzer? Well, no. Then why? Well, they couldn't answer that. So, we'd have to start from scratch about, it's all about leverage. You got to, and I won a lot of races with a lot of different people. And that was satisfying. I mean, the look on their face was pretty neat. I made, pretty good money. So it made a lot of friends. It was pretty neat.
So when did you decide to retire from racing?
When I had my driving school, Roger Johnson from RE Technologies, he was a big supporter of Greg Hodnett. Um, he came to me. He had bought everything that Greg Hodnett owned, and he asked me to help sort it out, figure out what's good, what's bad, do this, do that. Um, and he had this young boy that he thought could be a race car driver. So I went to work for him, steady paycheck right there at home. You know, the shop was 5 minutes from my house. And we had this young boy in the car. He was a go-kart racer, and he had talent, but he didn't have the heart.
Mm.
He thought it was cool to
Yeah.
drive a race car, but he didn't have the heart. He didn't have that passion to let everything else go and be all in. And I told Roger, I said, this is just too dangerous. This is not this isn't just a hee-haw good time. Well, then Brooke Tatnell had a relationship with Roger, so we brought him in, and we raced 97 and 98, and then they wanted to go World Outlaw races in 99. I said, I'm done. I don't want to do that. So that's when I went to work for Franklin Racing Products in Saxonburg, Indiana, or Saxonburg, Pennsylvania, where they build the rear ends.
And you're living in Indiana now.
Yep. I went to Saxonburg and worked it there for a couple of years, and then moved over here to actually start a speed shop with a guy, and it kind of fell through. And in the meantime, I built my oldest son Eric. We built a car to run around here non-wing, and I say timing is everything. Well, timing, it was at the worst time. We tried to do that because go to Gas City and there'd be 45 race cars.
Right.
So as a rookie, he got to hot lap, qualify, run a heat race, and run a B main and make $40. You know, and so we did that for a couple of years and just wasn't in the cards. So that's when I was basically done.
So last year, you get the call that you made the Sprint Car Hall of Fame. What was that moment like for you?
Well, every year when I knew it was about time, I kind of hold my breath, and I wouldn't get the call, but then I would see who got the call, and I thought, well, it's right in line where it should be.
Mm-hmm.
That guy goes in before me, he should. That guy goes in before me, he should. And the mechanic deal is there's not many go in every year, one or two, because they lump it together, I think, with car owners and this and that.
It's a
So
tough deal. I vote on that deal, and it's tough in that category.
yeah. So when Bob called me, I just come home from the store, pulled in my garage, and got out of my car and walked about 4 steps to the back door to my house, and I saw this area code that I knew was Iowa. I'm going, who's calling me from Iowa? And I answered it, and he said, "Hey, Deuce, this is Bob Baker." Well, I didn't know, but I thought, oh my goodness, could this be it? So I had to sit down right there on the spot, on the stoop, right there by my back steps. And he told me, and I was speechless. I mean, I wanted it. I shamefully admit I wanted it. Um, but to hear the words were unbelievable.
How do you get the name Deuce?
My dad loved to play cards. Um, he called my brother Ace and me
Wow.
Deuce. Well, he passed away when I was a senior in high school, and my uncle that I previously talked about was
Yeah.
his brother, and he called me Deuce. Well, I got introduced to Rick Unger as Deuce. Well, then it was just Deuce.
And it's just stuck.
Yeah, it was there. Um, my wife, my wife calls me Deuce. Um, Now, when we go back to Belpre we were just back not too long ago for um, to see some family. I've just got some cousins left and an aunt. They all call me Gary. Um, but Deuce is just I'm Deuce.
When she yells at you, does she call you Gary?
No, it's Deuce. It's damn it, Deuce, but it's Deuce.
I have to ask. I'm going to throw just some rapid things. I mean, again, I appreciate you being on the show. I'm just going to throw in closing. Just want to, I mean, I could talk to you for 4 hours, but uh, I don't want to keep you that long. But just when you look at this sport now and you see a guy like Davy Brown Sr., who's 90 years old, still winning races, it tells me that the old ways still work. Okay. You don't need to trick everything out or do some kind of abacus slide rule new thing. What you guys used to do will work today in my mind. Is that the case?
Well, I go through this every time I watch a race on TV or live, and my wife will just shake her head at me
I'd like to see
because
this, by the way.
I see I see what I see, and I'm going, how in the world do they even get around the racetrack sometimes, especially when it's rough? It's like Eldora took such a bad rap. Um, I'm telling you, it's not all that racetrack's fault. There's some things on those cars that just aren't right. Um, I would love, I would love to be able to spend a couple weekends with a good race car and a good driver just to see if the old stuff does work. And I think it does. I think that 69 proves it.
I
I
agree.
don't see, I don't see Davy Brown and Donald Kreitz doing, their car does not look like some of those other race cars. It's laid down, it's driving around the racetrack, and it hits a hole and it might rock a little bit, but the tires never leave the ground. If you watch, I don't care who it is, when them cars hit a hole, the front tires are off the ground. If the front tires are off the ground, can't steer. If the rear tires are off the ground, you have no traction.
You know, aggressive. I hear this a lot. Well, the new drivers are more aggressive. They didn't watch tape of Steve Kinzer.
No, and I
Sam,
think they do well. They drive over their head, and because the cars are so even, it's just spec cars. They're all the same weight, all in the same junk tire, all on a flat top wing, which is ridiculous in itself. Um, they all have tremendous horsepower. So the driver has to somehow make up for that. And it's driving in the corner way deeper than they should sometimes. So yeah, I think they are more aggressive all the time. Steve and Sammy and Doug were more aggressive when they had to be. There's a big difference. Every lap now is just win it or wear it. Every corner, win it or wear it. Because, the way they've got it set up, they've got you believing if you don't make the dash, you can't win a race. So your heat race is that first corner. I'm starting fourth. I'm starting fifth. I got to be leading it. Well, then, boom, crash, bang, boom, whatever. People sliding into each other. So, but there again, they've had to change everything the way they line up heat races because the cars are so evenly matched. You can't have your quick qualifier start sixth like we used to back in the day and make a transfer. Not enough laps. 8 laps aren't enough. And the cars get stretched out. I mean, every now and then you'll see a heat race that has a caution flag,
Yeah.
and you might see a guy make a pass, pass a couple cars. But if a heat race goes nonstop, it's just follow the leader. And that, I mean, and don't get me wrong, and I have to say this, by feature time, the races are still outstanding, especially when they get into lap traffic,
Yeah.
because those guys are masters at doing what they do. But it takes the track getting really wide, slick, um, slowing down, and I get that because these guys don't know that's what they've learned on. So I don't think they know how to get a car freed up to run a wet, sticky racetrack. It's my opinion. What I'm seeing, and so it's just so different
Mm-hmm.
than what it used to be, and it's just difference not always good. But that disclaimer I just put in, the main events are still outstanding. I mean, every night it doesn't disappoint. You know.
Greg Hodnett. My first experience with him is Sealands Grove, 1989, because Doug was coming in and wasn't going to make it there in time for, I guess, hot laps and time trials. And he didn't matter at the end of the night, but Greg got in the car. It's my first experience with him. Lo and behold, he ends up in Central PA. He was a guy that I would talk to every night I was at the track. I thought he's one of the smartest race car drivers I've ever talked to, and I've talked to a lot of them. So, Greg Hodnett, obviously from Memphis.
Yes.
Um, you knew him,
Yes.
obviously. How, I mean, just his career, what he accomplished. Obviously, probably not a surprise to you, uh, but just how everything ended. I was there that night, and heartbreaking, heartbreaking night.
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm a believer when it's your time, it's your time. So that was just a bad time. Bad time. Greg, what a true young Southern gentleman.
Yeah,
That's the way I can sum it up. Very intelligent. He took his racing very seriously. It was his craft. He was outstanding at it. I think I've even heard you say, or other people say, there was nobody that won more races during a certain point in time in Pennsylvania that he did
mm-hmm.
in several different race cars. You know, but yeah, I mean, just one of the nicest, smartest guys, and the way that whole all went about him working on the 8D is, I had a four-wheeler and we were out behind the shop, me and Hubbard and our friend Bruce Sumter. We were out running around this little racetrack, and I pitched myself off and separated my shoulder.
Yep.
And I think back then we were racing like 13 times in 18 days in Pennsylvania, New York. So I knew I needed some help. So I called Greg's dad, said, "Hey, think Greg could," because they were racing a little bit around Memphis. Yeah, I said, "Do you think you could let Greg go?" "Oh yeah, yeah, that'd be good for him." So, we made a deal, and his dad said, "Well, throw your helmet bag in there just in case." And man, he just fit right in. Okay, Greg, here's what we got to do. He just did it. And I think he soaked it in. And that deal at Selinsgrove that night was, I don't remember where we were right before that, but Doug said, "Hey, I'm going to be late. I got to pick Jerry and the kids up at the airport. Hell, Greg can drive it." And I saw Greg's jaw hit the ground. That's the last thing he expected. So we get to the track and I said, don't worry about it, man. Just, you know, do what you do. You know, because Memphis Motorsports at that time was as big as Selinsgrove. So he had laps on a big racetrack, but he didn't have laps in the baddest car in the country. So he went out and started the car, and that engine, it was kind of cold natured. If you didn't get it really good and warm, it would spit and sputter a little bit. Well, he didn't make very many hot laps because it was spitting and sputtering. He didn't know what to do. So he pulls in and he pulls his helmet off and he's telling me, I said, just let it run, let it get some heat in. It'll be all right. You didn't hurt it. So I think he qualified 8th or 9th, something like that, with 4 or 5 hot laps, you know, practice laps. And he was actually strapped in, waiting on the next heat race. And you saw Doug's motorhome pop over the deal there to come in the infield. And you could just see the look of disappointment. And I thought, well, maybe Doug will let him. But Doug was already suited up and,
Yeah.
you know, he come out of the motorhome with his helmet in his hand, ready to race. But, you know, that's okay. He became quite a race car driver, quite a race car driver.
And then some.
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, a true Southern gentleman, just one of the nicest guys you could ever be around.
And could talk about many different things outside of racing.
Oh yeah, he was very intelligent, very intelligent. He had an engineering degree, I think, and
Yep.
you know, he was his dad actually drove for my father-in-law back in the day at Hoyt Hodnett,
Yep.
back in the day for Bob Gillentine at West Memphis, Arkansas. I can remember Bob telling me, he called him Junior. Junior, you're not quite aggressive enough. You need to be a little, you know. Well, Bob, I don't want to, you know, I don't want to tear stuff up. He said, don't worry about that, son. We can fix it. Well, he said after that, Hoyt was over there every week, hammers and pry bars and straightening wheels, and you know they were going to the front after that. So Greg come from good stock, great guy, great family.
Miss him. I definitely miss him.
Yes,
Just going to
yes.
the racetrack and just an ambassador for the sport.
Yes.
So last thing, you know, you talked about the racing, still good. If you could change, well, actually, maybe 2 things. If there was one thing you could change just from what you see in your involvement now, if you were in charge, what would it be?
I'd change the way the wings are made.
Thank you.
There's 3 things. Change the wings, throw away the tire rule, and probably throw away the weight rule. Because I don't understand the weight rule. It's certainly not to save money.
No.
So I don't understand the weight rule at all. I mean, that to me, when you build a race car with all the titanium and carbon fiber and all this, and then add $50 weights to it, that's stupid. So why have a weight rule? I mean, I know some guys would probably try to cheat on their frames, but I would hope that the top-notch builders would say, no, we're not doing that. We're going to save you from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The wing deal, I think they need to put the belly back in the wings.
Agreed.
And even up the sideboards and cut the sideboards down. That's where they should have done that to begin with. Making a flat top wing that's part of the problem. That's why the cars don't want to lay down good through a corner. And the tire rule, well, I'm sorry, there's no R&D, I don't think. Looks like as long as they hold air and they're kind of round, they're a race car tire. So, and it takes so much out of learning how to race. I mean, back when, you know, I know I'm an old fart. I know I'm living off the old days, but back in the day, there was Goodyear, Hoosier, and McCreary. And, you know, Goodyear had 3 or 4 different compounds, and you had to be on your game. And now it's just, well, make sure that thing holds air. That's the only thing you got to concentrate on. I hope it holds air and it don't blow up.
No, and you hope you get the right size.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the other thing. Last thing, you watch a lot of racing.
Yeah.
When you've seen a lot of young guys come and go. And we know Donnie Schatz is great. We know, Brad Sweet, David Gravel, they're all great. When you look at the young guys, the 25 and younger, and in that age, is there a guy you see now that, other than Larson's in his 30s now, but you want to see who you think is going to be the next star of this sport?
Well, I think Gio Scelzi, Ryan Timms, and Emerson Axe. I think those three have got it going on. Sometimes, well, for instance, like Ryan Timms, he knows how to win. But sometimes I think you move up too quick to a national series, and you're going to take a butt whooping. I don't care how many times you've won, you're going to take a butt whooping. So your mental attitude has to understand that. And I don't know these three guys well enough to, well, like Gio, he left that ride for whatever reason. So there's got to be something, in his makeup. But those three, I think, are, the up and comers. They just got to be careful, to not let it beat them up before they realize their potential and get going.
I think mine's Buddy Kofoid. I think he's going to be an outlaw champion within 2 or 3 years.
Oh yeah, I mean, I didn't mention him because to me he's already there.
Yeah,
I mean,
the way struggle, did he?
What amazes me about him is how he can break down the race after the fact. My heavens, he's so switched on. He's so in tune to what he does right and what he does wrong, and how he can make up for that. So he's there. I mean, I think winning championships, even in a midget, helps. I mean, that's no small feat in itself, but that helped him become who he is today because he knows how to win. He knows how to race for points. And man, he's outstanding. And that, the Toyota thing is good.
Yeah.
And there again, Dennis Roth, I don't know the man. I know he's been around forever, but he looks to me like he's one of the guys that says, have at it, boys. And leaves them alone.
I think the sport's definitely in good hands from a driver's standpoint. A lot of young guys. And, Gravel's like 33. He's like a senior citizen.
But to me, between 35 and 40 is probably some of your strongest years.
I know.
As a driver.
It used to be.
So he's okay. He's still got it. There's no doubt.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Deuce, thank you for joining the deep dive. You're one of the guys who was on my list. I was great to run into you at Knoxville. I'm sure I'll be calling you again.
Well, that anytime, I love, like I made it a point to seek you out just to tell you, I love when when you were talking about Doug, because he's such a neat person, and it's just neat to hear somebody bring up one of the old guys. And, then for you to invite me on your show to me is just a bonus. So, and I really appreciate it. I enjoy doing this. It's good to, shamefully going to say it's good to be recognized, even though, I've been out of it for a long time, but it's neat. I love racing. I miss it. I don't know. It's just part of me, so it is what it is, I guess.
Well, I hope some people give you a call because I'd like to see you do give some advice on a car again. And I want to see selfishly, I want to hear your wife yell at you and call you Deuce instead of Gary.
Well, she was yelling at me this morning because I overslept
Oh,
and we were going to go out to eat and realized we didn't have enough time.
uh-oh.
So neither one of us has eaten yet. So she's probably, I don't know where she is. She's probably she's got a craft room. She's pretty crafty about making stuff. So I have to take her out and feed her a good dinner.
Yeah. Happy wife, happy
She,
life.
she's been my, she's been my rock. I said this at the Hall of Fame. Uh, it goes to her because um, she's been with me since 1980 and moved her, I don't know, 6 or 8 times from here to there to everywhere.
Tough.
And a lot of the times, unfortunately, is, hey, baby, I got a new deal. I'm going to go put cars together. You need to pack the stuff up. And she did it, so she's the true Hall of Famer in this family for sure. We got 2 great sons that she raised the first one for sure. They would come with me after he'd get out of school and stay all summer. And then, back home they'd go. And then my second boy, AJ, I was with him. I was home more with him. So, but they're doing great. They got families of their own, and I've got 11-year-old granddaughter that's just eat up with racing. She says, "Pap, why can't we have a quarter midget?" And I say, "Well, because we don't have the money, kid. Simple as that. Can't start anything you can't finish."
Well,
So
tell your wife I like the palm tree. It was her idea.
it was,
It's
it
something
was
different. I like different. And again, thank you very much for joining the show. And I'm sure I'll be talking to you more in the future.
all right. Sounds good, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's going to wrap up another edition of the SprintCarUnlimited.com deep dive presented by Dottie's Family Market in Dover, PA. Thank you very much to Gary Deuce Turrill for joining us on the show. Greatly appreciated. A lot of good stuff there. If you like the content on our YouTube channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can also check out our daily exclusive content at SprintCarUnlimited.com. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Deep Dive.